On a cold Tuesday morning, the Galactic Council's diplomatic fleet reached the edge of Earth's solar system. Their ships were huge, shiny ships that sparkled like jewels in the dark of space. Ambassador Valen stood on the bridge of the Harmonious Exchange, the lead ship, and watched the small blue planet turn peacefully below. He had done this same thing with hundreds of different species hundreds of times before. It always went the same way. The first thing that happened was shock. The new species would freak out when they found out they weren't the only ones in the universe. Then they were afraid because they knew how much better the Council's technology and military power were than theirs. Finally, they accepted it. They would sign the treaties, give up their resources, and become junior members of the galactic community. It was a process that had been going on for more than 3,000 years. Valen fixed his ceremonial robes and looked over the terms on his datapad one more time. The people would give up 40% of the minerals in their system. They would let Council observers come to their home world. They would send soldiers to help the Council keep the peace. In exchange, they would get access to galactic trade routes, protection from hostile species, and advanced technology. It was really nice of them. Most species had to give up 60% of their resources. Some had given up even more. The Council had an easy time making first contact with the humans. They had been sending radio signals into space for more than 100 years, practically yelling their location to anyone who could hear them. They had sent out probes with maps that showed exactly where their planet was. They had even sent primitive satellites into space that left trails of radiation that pointed right back to Earth. It was so innocent that it seemed like a child. The Council had just followed the signs back home. Valen's assistant, a young officer named Kelvin, came up to him looking nervous. "Ambassador, we've sent the usual greeting package to Earth. Now we are waiting for them to respond." Valen said, "Good. How long will it take for them to answer?" "Sir, any second now. Their ways of talking to each other are basic but work. They should be able to get our message and translate it within an hour." Valen nodded and then looked back at the screen. From up here Earth looked so calm. So weak. The people had no idea what was going to happen. They didn't have any defense satellites, plasma shields, or antimatter weapons. Their most advanced spacecraft could barely leave their own atmosphere. This would be the easiest deal he ever made. The escort ships of the Council formed a circle around the Harmonious Exchange. There were 12 of them, and they were sleek frigates that were more for show than for fighting. They were painted in the Council's official colors and had flags from all the different species that were part of it. It was supposed to be impressive to show the humans how strong and united the galactic community they were about to join was. "Sir, we're getting a response from Earth," Kelvin said all of a sudden. "Great. Put it on the screen." It was a short message. In plain English, it says, "Stand by for escort." Valen blinked. "Escort? What do they mean, escort?" Kelvin looked like he didn't understand. "I don't know, sir. Maybe it's a mistake in the translation? Their language is very basic." No, Valen said slowly. "English is pretty simple. They say they are sending someone to lead us. But where are they taking us?" Before anyone could say anything, alarms started going off all over the bridge. The tactical officer jumped out of his seat, his face pale. "Ambassador, we're seeing a huge energy signature. Something is coming out from behind the moon." Valen turned to look at the tactical display. His blood froze. Something was coming out of the dark side of the moon. At first it was just a shadow, a dark shape blocking out the stars. But Valen could see it clearly when it got into the light. It was a boat. A ship made by people. And it was really big. The ship was more than 5 kilometers long and had a huge wedge of gray metal on it with armor plating that was sharp. It didn't look anything like the graceful curves of Council ships. This was brutal, useful engineering. There were missile ports, weapon batteries, and huge gun turrets on every surface. There were strange symbols painted on its hull, and the words Etinus Titan were written in letters that were 50 meters high. "By the ancients," Valen said quietly. "How did they make that?" The Titan moved with surprising grace for a big thing. It put itself right between the Council fleet and Earth, where it stood guard over its home world. Lights on its hull flickered on, showing that it had even more weapons than Valen had first thought. There were hundreds of them. Perhaps thousands. When Kelvin read from his instruments, his voice shook. "Sir, I'm seeing some very high power readings. Their reactor output is almost as high as the output of all of our ships put together. And those weapons, Ambassador, are mass accelerators. Moving weapons. Weapons that move." Valen said again. "Are they throwing rocks?" "Not quite, sir. According to these readings, they're speeding up metal projectiles to a large part of the speed of light. Yes, it's old technology, but at that size and speed." He stopped talking, but Valen got it. A rock that moved at a quarter the speed of light was no longer just a rock. It was a planet destroyer. How many ships like this do they own? Valen asked in a low voice. Kelvin looked at his screen. The Titan is one of 12 identical ships, according to their broadcast. They call them the Titan class. Well, 12 of these monsters had been made by people. And they had done it before they ever met another intelligent species. What kind of people built dreadnoughts before they met their neighbors? Valen's hands shook as he held on to the railing. This wasn't how the first meeting was supposed to go. No way. Valen's 3 hearts skipped a beat when the huge shape moved out of the way of the moon. For a moment, his mind couldn't understand what he was seeing. It was too big. Not right. It was too hard for a species that had just left its own planet. The warship floated in space like a monument to death. 5 kilometers long from front to back, which is longer than some of the smaller moons in this system. Valen's blood didn't freeze because of the size. It was the way it looked. War was written all over that hull. The ship's hull was a dark gray, almost black color, and it was covered in thick armor plating that looked like the scales of an old beast. There were no smooth curves, no beautiful designs, and no artistic touches. This wasn't meant to look good. It was made to last. To last. To end. It looked like the armor had already been tested against gunfire because it had scars and pits in some places. There were deep grooves along the surface where extra plating had been welded on, making it even thicker. But the weapons were what really scared Valen. They were everywhere. There were dozens of huge turrets sticking out of the hull, and each one could turn in more than one direction. Long rails ran the length of the ship, and they were huge accelerators that could send things flying into space. There were missile tubes all over the middle sections like honeycombs. Point defense cannons covered every angle so there were no blind spots. It seemed like the ship was made by someone who thought they would be fighting in all directions at once. The letters ETNS Titan were painted on the hull in such big letters that they could probably be read from the ground. The words Earth Treaty Naval Service and a series of numbers were written in smaller letters below that. Valen's translator had a hard time with some of the military terms used by humans, but the meaning was clear. This was a ship of war. Not a platform for defense. Not a boat for patrol. A real, dedicated weapon of war. How? Valen finally managed to say. How did they make this? Torin, his tactical officer who had fought in 3 different wars, looked at his tools with wide eyes. He kept running scan after scan with his hands on the controls, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Ambassador, I don't get it. Our intelligence reports say that humans only got stable fusion power 16 years ago. That's not even close to enough time to build a few small ships, let alone something like this. Valen snapped, then our intelligence was wrong, but his voice shook. No, our intelligence was right. They only got fusion to work 16 years ago. But they didn't use fusion to make this ship. Torin brought up a detailed scan on the big screen. Hey, look at this, Ambassador. The makeup of the hull. It's made of steel. Steel that is very thick and has a composite weave. The inside is made of titanium and carbon fiber. They've been using these materials for more than 100 years. Valen looked at the screen. Are you saying they made a 5-kilometer warship out of basic materials? Not basic, sir. Easy. Simple. But used in huge amounts and with amazing accuracy. The metallurgy is really good, to be honest. They made an alloy that is almost as strong as our regular hull materials, but they did it in a different way. Yes, it's heavier, but at this size that extra weight just makes it harder to break. From her station, the ship's engineer, another officer, spoke up. Her voice was so low that it was hard to hear. Ambassador, I can now see the power signature. They are using more than one fusion reactor. I can see at least 20 different reactor cores running at the same time. They all look rough to us, but together they're making almost as much power as our flagship Point 20 fusion reactors. Valen felt lightheaded. How can that even be stable? The engineer said, it shouldn't be. The amount of protection needed, the cooling systems, the extra safety measures. It's crazy. But somehow they've been able to make it work. And sir, they're using that power to charge those accelerators. Torin focused on one of the huge rails that ran along the Titan's hull. Ambassador, these are kinetic accelerators. Magnetic rails that use electromagnetic force to launch solid objects. It's an old piece of technology. Very basic. When we made plasma and laser weapons, the Council stopped using kinetic weapons thousands of years ago. So why are you so worried about them? Valen asked. Torin looked him in the eye. Because of the size, sir. A normal kinetic weapon fires a projectile that is this big. He put his hands a few centimeters apart. At a speed of about 1% of the speed of light. Not good for small ships, but energy shields can easily block them. These weapons. He pointed at the screen. These rails are 40 meters wide. Based on my calculations, they could launch something as big as a shuttle. And from the power readings, they could speed it up to 30 to 40% of the speed of light. The bridge stopped making noise. Everyone knew what that meant. At those speeds, kinetic energy grew very quickly. A projectile didn't need bombs. It didn't need warheads. The energy released by the impact would be like that of nuclear weapons. Maybe worse. But their targeting systems can't be right, Valen said in a desperate tone. At those speeds, even a small mistake would make the projectile miss by thousands of kilometers. Torin said quietly, I thought so too. That's why I did a passive scan of their targeting arrays. Ambassador, they have 17 different sensor systems that all work together. Radar, LiDAR, thermal imaging, gravitational sensors, and even very basic quantum detection grids. I don't even know how powerful the computers need to be to handle all that data in real time. But sir, if their targeting is even half as good as their power generation, those weapons could hit a ship from anywhere in the solar system. Valen sat down in his command chair. He was trying to figure out what he was seeing as fast as he could. People had only just begun to explore their own star system. They didn't talk to any other kinds of animals. Not familiar with technology from other galaxies. You can't get to antimatter, plasma weapons, or quantum shields. But they had made this monster. Why? He asked out loud. Why would they make something like this before meeting another species? Kelvin, his young helper, spoke up with some hesitation. Sir, I've been going over the human database we downloaded before we got into the system. Their past is not good. For as long as they have been recorded, they have been fighting wars with each other. A lot of wars. They've made weapons that are meant to destroy their own cities and people. They've made enough nuclear warheads to destroy their planet many times over. Valen said that happens a lot with species that haven't come into contact with humans yet. Many races go through violent times before coming together. Yes, sir, but the people never came together. Not really. They still have their own countries, armies, and governments. The Earth Treaty Organization runs this ship, the Titan. It's a group of their strongest countries that came together to protect themselves from outside threats. Threats from outside? They didn't even know we were there. Kelvin nodded slowly. That's right, sir. They made this fleet to protect themselves from threats they could only imagine. They looked up at the stars and thought that anything out there might be dangerous. So they got ready. They spent years building these ships just in case. Valen looked back at the Titan, which was floating in space without making a sound. The ship's running lights made shadows on its armored hull, which made it look even scarier. Weapon ports stared out like dark eyes, watching and waiting. A species that got ready for war before they even met an enemy. A race that saw all the possibilities in the universe and chose to use overwhelming military force as the safest way to go. What kind of people were these humans? And most importantly, what would happen now? Without warning, the screens on every council ship started to flicker. For a brief moment, the normal screens went blank and were replaced by static. Then a face showed up. A face that looks like a person. Valen's head of security started yelling orders to his team right away. How did they get past our encryption? Stop the feed. Stop it now. But nothing worked. The human transmission had gotten past all of the council's security measures, firewalls, and defense systems that had been built over the course of 3,000 years. The face stayed on all of the fleet screens. By human standards, the man looked to be in his mid-40s. He had short gray hair, skin that looked old, and a calm look on his face that made it seem like he had been through trouble before and wasn't too impressed by it. He wore a dark blue uniform with a lot of patches and medals, but Valen didn't know what any of them meant. The bridge of the Titan was behind him. It was a surprisingly small space with monitors, controls, and crew members working at their stations. Hello from Earth, the person said. His voice was steady and professional, but there was steel in it. I am Captain Jack Miller, and I am in charge of the ETNS Titan. We got your terms for the first contact. Thank you for coming all this way to bring them. Valen felt a little bit better. Maybe this conversation will turn out to be okay after all. Maybe the people knew they were outmatched even though they had a big warship. After that, Miller went on. Here are the terms we agree on. The relief was gone right away. You will leave our solar system right away, Miller said as if he were talking about the weather. You will not come back unless Earth's government specifically asks you to. You will not threaten us, our colonies, or our interests anywhere in this galaxy. You will not try to block, watch, or get in the way of humans going into space. He stopped for a moment to let that sink in. If you agree to these terms, We won't show you what the Titan-class warships can do to your fleet. Valen couldn't say anything for a moment. His mouth opened and closed but nothing came out. The bridge crew around him sat there in shock. At last he spoke, "You can't be serious. This isn't how first contact works. There are rules. Every species has to follow certain rules. You can't just threaten the Galactic Council." Miller's face didn't change. "Is it Ambassador Valen? For 30 years we've been listening to your shows. We picked up your radio signals long before you picked up ours. We have been reading your council emails, downloading your databases and learning your languages. We know exactly how your system makes first contact." Valen's blood turned cold. For 30 years. The people had been watching them for 30 years, Miller went on. "We know about the standard terms. We know how you get to new worlds and ask for 40% of their resources. Sometimes as much as 60%. We know how you make species join your army and fight your wars. We know that you set up observation posts to make sure everyone follows your rules. We know about your past, Ambassador. We have looked into every first contact you have ever made." The captain leaned forward a little bit. "And we made the choice that we didn't like what we saw." Kelvin whispered to Valen in a hurry. "Sir, this is not possible. Quantum algorithms protect our communication systems. A species that lived before contact would need hundreds of years to break them." Valen said, "Apparently not." Miller kept on talking. "We had 30 years to get ready for this moment. We had 30 years to build ships, train crews, make weapons and get our position set. You see, people have learned a lot from our long violent past. If someone comes to your door with better weapons and tells you to give up, you have two options. You can give up and hope they are kind, or you can make sure you are too dangerous to mess with." He pointed to the Titan's bridge behind him. "We picked the second choice." Valen tried to take charge of the situation again. "You're being silly. Your ship is cool, but the Council has thousands of ships. Our technology is hundreds of years ahead of yours. You can't possibly think that one warship gives you the right to tell us what to do." "One." Miller smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. "Ambassador, the Titan is not alone. Would you like to meet her sisters?" His tactical officer gasped before Valen could say anything. "Sir." "More connections. There are a lot of big energy signatures coming from Jupiter's orbit, the asteroid belt, and Mars' orbit. By the ancients, they're everywhere." The view screen showed more than one picture. One by one, 11 more ships that looked like the Titan powered up their systems and showed themselves. They had been hiding all over the solar system, waiting and running silent. Now they lit up like dark stars, and their running lights and weapon systems came on in a show of power that was perfectly timed. 12 warships of the Titan class. Each one can destroy a planet. And they had the whole solar system of Earth locked down. The main screen still showed Miller's picture. "Ambassador, humanity spent 30 years getting ready for your arrival. We made 12 ships for war. We taught 50,000 people how to be crew members. We built military bases on every major moon and planet in our system. We made weapons just for fighting ships like yours. And most importantly, we as a species made a decision together. We would rather die free than live as your subjects." Valen shook his head. "This is crazy. Do you know what you're putting at risk? The Council keeps the peace in thousands of star systems. We stop wars, keep trade routes safe and protect weaker species from attackers. Without us, the galaxy would fall apart." Miller said, "Maybe. Or maybe you're just the meanest kid on the playground, and no one is brave enough to stand up to you. No matter what, it's not our problem. People don't want your peace, your protection, or your technology. We'll make our own technology, form our own alliances, and protect our own interests. You will be by yourself. Alone. You won't have any friends, support, or help when real threats come up. Ambassador, we've been by ourselves for 200,000 years. We are used to it. And what about threats?" Miller's smile turned cold. "We are the danger. We are the ones who split the atom just to see if we could, and then used it right away to destroy 2 cities. We built enough nuclear weapons to kill everyone on Earth, and then we aimed them at ourselves for 50 years. We are the species that looked at the stars and thought, they are probably hostile, let's build warships first." He sat back in his chair. "You came here thinking we would be scared of you. But Ambassador, people made up fear. For all of time, we've scared ourselves with more and more creative ways to destroy things. You're going to have to do a lot more than just bring a few diplomatic ships." Valen felt something he hadn't felt in hundreds of years of service. Not just fear. Not just shock. Something more. He was looking at a type of animal that really didn't care if the whole galaxy turned against them. They had thought about that and decided they could handle it. Miller said, "This is what happens next. Your fleet turns around and heads out of our solar system. You tell your council that people don't want to join. You tell them to leave us alone. And if anyone wants to test our resolve, you need to make sure they know what they're getting into. He stood up, and the camera angle changed to show the whole bridge of the Titan behind him. Dozens of crew members were at their stations, ready and waiting. Ambassador, we didn't build 12 warships. We made 12 warships and then trained for 10 years for this exact situation. Everyone on these ships has been training to fight the Galactic Council since before you heard our radio signals. We know your plans, your weapons, and your tactics. We've played this situation out in our heads 1,000 times. Miller's last words were soft, but they were full of certainty. People chose to be ready for war instead of begging for peace. You need to choose whether or not you want to see if we're lying. The transmission was over. The screens went back to normal. Valen sat in his command chair and looked at the 12 warships that were now surrounding his fleet. He wondered how first contact had gone so badly. There was silence for exactly 12 seconds after Miller sent his message. Then Commander Rolf, who was in charge of the Council's escort frigates, made a choice that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He told all the ships to line up next to each other. Show these savages what real military accuracy looks like. Valen's eyes got very big. Commander, no. Stop. That's an order. But it was too late. The 12 frigates of the Council broke up their formation and started to move around the Titan. They were beautiful ships, with sleek lines and hulls that shone in the sun. They moved in perfect time like a military ballet that had scared hundreds of species before. It was supposed to be a show of strength, a reminder that the Council's army was not only bigger but also better trained, more organized, and more professional. At first, the Titan didn't do anything. It just hung there in space, dark, big, and quiet. For a moment, Valen hoped the humans would back down and see that they were outmatched, even though they had great weapons. Then Captain Miller's voice came through the radio, calm as a lake. Fire solution Charlie. Only for targeting computers. A young woman at the weapons station on the Titan's bridge answered right away. Solution Charlie is locked and ready, Captain. Targeting computer is on. Human override disabled. Fire, Miller said simply. The Titan still didn't move. It didn't have to. 12 of the huge magnetic accelerators came to life along the hull. There was no loud noise, no charging sound or warning lights. The capacitors had been ready since the Council fleet got there. The targeting computers had been keeping track of every ship, figuring out its path, taking into account movement, gravity, solar wind, and 100 other things. Then it shot. Valen didn't see the projectiles go off. They were going too fast. In less than a second they sped up to 40% of the speed of light. The rail guns were pulsing with blue-white energy which he could see. He saw streaks of light moving between the Titan and his fleet faster than his mind could keep up with. He saw accuracy that shouldn't have been possible. The first round went 3 meters above the hull of Frigate 7. Close enough that the gravitational wake of the projectile actually pulled on the ship's shields, making them flicker. The crew inside could feel the ship shake. So close that everyone on board thought they were going to die. But it didn't hit. It went past them and on into deep space. The second round went under Frigate 3, so close that it went between the ship's engine nacelles. The third one went through the space between Frigates 9 and 10, missing both by less than 5 meters. The fourth ship curved around the flagship, and its path was carefully planned to use the flagship's gravity to change its course. This showed not only accuracy but also an understanding of orbital mechanics that made Valen's head spin. All 12 rounds went off within 2 seconds of each other. All 12 went through the formation of the Council fleet. Through it, around it, between ships, over shields and under hulls. None of them hit anything. None of them got close enough to do any damage. But they all could have. Torin, the tactical officer, was shaking as he pulled up the data on the trajectory. You need to see this, Ambassador. This can't be happening. Valen's legs were weak, so he stumbled over to the tactical station. He saw what had just happened on the screen. It was clear that only very powerful computers could have figured out the pattern and timing of the 12 projectiles being fired. Their paths were braided together like a rope as they crossed over and under each other in the air. They had used the gravity of the Council ships themselves to change their paths, weaving through the fleet in a way that showed they knew exactly where each ship was going, not just where they were. Torin whispered, "To hit us this hard, you have to guess where we're going to be." They had to figure out where each ship would be before we even got there. Just the processing power? Where did the projectiles go? Valen asked, but a part of him didn't want to know. Torin pointed out the path of one round on the screen. This one, the 12th projectile, went right past our fleet. It went for about 4 minutes at a speed of 0.4 light years per second. Then it hit a moon that was 3 astronomical units away from here and was orbiting a gas giant. He opened up a video feed. There was now a growing cloud of debris where a small dead moon used to be. The impact released so much energy that the moon literally turned to gas. In a split second, trillions of tons of rock turned into plasma and dust and no longer existed. Torrin said, the kinetic energy of that impact was about the same as 50,000 nuclear weapons. His voice was empty. From one projectile. And they shot 12 of them. Through our fleet. Without hitting anything. Valen looked at the damage. A moon. A whole moon gone in a flash. And that was only one shot at what Miller called a small part of the ship's capacity. It was hard to hear Commander Raltha's voice. Ambassador, I'm telling all the frigates to go back to their defensive positions. We are standing down. Good choice, Valen said quietly. The screens showed Captain Miller's face again. He wasn't smiling this time. That was a show, Ambassador. The targeting computer only fired 12 rounds. No help from people. We let the computers do the math to make a point. Our weapons can keep an eye on your ships, guess where you're going and shoot through your formation without breaking a sweat. He bent over. But this is what you should really be worried about. The bullets were fired at 40% of the speed of light. Our weapons can speed up projectiles by up to 70%. We used partial power to give you time to get ready for them. And we meant to miss. Every shot was meant to go through your fleet as a warning. Another crew member spoke up behind Miller. Captain, Fire Control says that all systems are still ready to go. Ready to fire again on your command. Stand down, Lieutenant, Miller said, not taking his eyes off the camera. I believe we've made our point. He looked back at Valen. Ambassador, you wanted to know what people are? We made these weapons not to fight you but to fight each other. We made machines that can figure out where 12 relativistic projectiles will go as they fly through a moving fleet formation and also where each ship will be 5 seconds from now. We did that because we thought that somewhere in the galaxy, someone would come along with technology that we couldn't compete with. We made sure our accuracy and targeting were so good that it wouldn't matter. Valen found his voice, but it was barely a whisper. You could have killed us. Yes, Miller said. We might have been able to. Those 12 rounds could have hit the target directly instead of just missing it. There would be no more escort ships for you. But Ambassador, we are not monsters. We don't want to hurt you. We just want you to go. He pointed at something off-screen, and the tactical display changed to show all 12 Titan-class warships. All of our ships just saw this demonstration. All of the captains know how to do it again. All 12 ships have more than 3,000 magnetic accelerators. 3,000 accurate weapons that can hit targets from across the solar system. Think about that for a second. Think about what it really means. Valen was thinking about it. He couldn't stop thinking about it. A species that could shoot 12 relativistic projectiles through a fleet formation without hitting anything didn't just have good weapons. They had learned how to destroy things with math better than the Council had, even though technology had come a long way over the past few thousand years. What are you? Valen whispered the question that everyone on his bridge was thinking. Miller's face got a little softer. Ambassador, we're human. We are the species that looked up at the stars and saw beauty, wonder, and potential. But we also saw a threat. So we got ready. We hoped for the best but got ready for the worst. We built these ships not so we could use them but so we wouldn't have to. He got up. Now you have a choice. You can tell your council that people are safe and should be left alone. You could also try to call our bluff and see if we really want to use these weapons in real life. But I do have one free piece of advice for you, Ambassador. We've never made a weapon in all of human history that we weren't willing to use. Not once. The broadcast stopped again. The Titan's weapon systems turned off, but the ship stayed on alert, watching and waiting. Valen fell into his command chair and put his head in his hands. Kelvin was quietly figuring out how long it would take the Council to put together a fleet big enough to take on 12 Titan-class warships. The number he came up with was very scary. Earth kept spinning peacefully on the view screen, blue and green and completely unconcerned. And around it, 12 dark warships stood guard, silent monuments to the oldest and most important idea in human history: peace through superior firepower. 6 hours after the demonstration, the Council fleet left the solar system of Earth. There was no ceremony, no formal goodbye, and no last-ditch effort to reach an agreement. The ships just turned around and jumped to travel faster than light, disappearing into the emptiness of space. The whole way back to Council headquarters, Ambassador Valen sat in his chair and stared at the tactical recordings of the 12 projectiles that were going through his fleet. He kept watching the replay to figure out what had just happened. The emergency session started right away at Council headquarters, which is on a space station the size of a small moon. 400 member species sent representatives to the Great Chamber, where their voices made a mess of questions and demands. How did people make weapons like this? Why hadn't the Council found them sooner? What did this mean for the way things were? Valen gave his report, and even though he was tired, his voice was steady. He showed them the Titan footage, the recordings of Captain Miller's messages, and how deadly accurate human weapons are. As they watched the moon break apart, vaporized by a single kinetic round, the room fell silent. "This can't be done," said Representative Korth, a member of the Council for more than 2,000 years. "Species that haven't been in contact don't build fleets. They don't really get how space travel works. How did they pull this off?" Director Halvis, the head of Council Intelligence, stepped forward to give his report. He shook a little as he turned on the holographic display. "We've been looking at everything we know about people for the past week. We have looked at their broadcasts, their history, and how their technology has changed over time. And we found something that makes sense of it all." The hologram showed Earth slowly spinning, and then it zoomed in to show different places on the planet. Cities that are in ruins. Battlefields with scars from explosions. Museums full of weapons from different times. Halvis said that people have been fighting wars for as long as we have records of them. Not just fights that happen now and then. War that never stops. They have fought over land, resources, religion, ideas, and even for reasons they don't fully understand. They fought 2 world wars in the last 100 years that killed more than 70 million of their own people. The room was filled with shocked whispers. 70 million people died in only 2 wars? Halvis kept talking, his voice low. But here's the really amazing thing. They didn't only use regular weapons to fight. In 1945, they were able to split the atom and turn it into a weapon right away. They dropped 2 atomic bombs on their own cities, killing hundreds of thousands of people right away. Instead of being scared enough to stop, they built more. More of them. They made weapons that could destroy their whole planet many times over. The hologram showed huge mushroom clouds, lots of missiles and submarines with nuclear warheads on board. During what they call the Cold War, there were more than 70,000 nuclear weapons in the world. They all pointed at themselves. They lived for decades with the threat of total destruction hanging over their heads, but somehow they didn't kill themselves. Representative Korth shook his head in disbelief. "That's crazy. No species that is rational would do that." "Exactly," Halvis said. "By our standards it's crazy. But it also works. You see, all of that fighting, all of those weapons and all of those strategies weren't made to fight aliens. They were made to fight with each other. The weapons on those Titan-class ships are all based on technology they made for fighting on planets. The kinetic accelerators? They made bigger versions of the weapons they designed to blow up enemy bunkers. What about the computers that aim? Based on systems they made to keep an eye on enemy missiles. The design of the ship itself is based on their naval warfare doctrine." Another person from the group spoke up. "But they've only been able to fly in space for a few decades. How did they make 12 huge warships in that time?" Halvis said simply, "Because they cheated. They didn't wait for better technology. They made do with what they had. They've been working with steel, titanium, and carbon fiber for more than 100 years. They made those ships the same way they made everything else, with brute force, a lot of industrial power, and a willingness to throw a lot of money at a problem until it is solved." The hologram changed to show factories, shipyards, and mining operations run by people. "Humanity has an industrial base that is unlike anything we've seen in a species before contact. For 200 years, they've been improving the ways they make things in large quantities. When they heard our broadcasts and knew we were there, they just used that industrial capacity to make warships instead. They did it in 30 years. Valen said something from his seat. "There's one more thing you all need to know. Captain Miller wasn't scared when I talked to him. There weren't any of them. They really thought they could fight the whole council if they had to. And after seeing their weapons in action, I'm not sure they're wrong." Again the chamber was quiet. The effects were huge. The council had kept order for 3,000 years by following a simple rule. They were the strongest military force in the galaxy. New species joined because they had to. But people had just shown that a determined species with the right mindset could fight that power, even with simple tools. For the next few months, Council intelligence kept an eye on people. They listened in on human conversations, studied their military drills, and watched as the 12 Titan-class warships of Earth patrolled the solar system. What they learned was both interesting and scary. People trained for war all the time. Every day their military crews practiced for different situations, from fighting on one ship to fighting with the whole fleet. They practiced fighting enemies they'd never met and preparing for threats that might never come. It was paranoid, over the top, and very effective. Then something that wasn't planned happened. A small species on the edge of Council territory sent a secret message to Earth about 8 months after the Council left. The Galaxy had been giving the Council 60% of their resources for the last 100 years. Their message was clear: how did you say no? Captain Miller, who is now somewhat famous throughout the galaxy because of leaked footage of his fight with Valen, answered personally. The talk was short but important. Within weeks, Galaxy representatives came to Earth for private talks. In a few months they signed a treaty with humans to protect them. If the Council tried to get more resources, Earth's fleet would step in. The Council didn't do anything. They couldn't risk a war with humans over one small species. Within the first year, 2 more species followed the Galaxy's lead. Both were small members of the Council, both were tired of taking resources, and both quietly signed agreements with Earth to protect each other. People didn't ask for land or resources. They just offered protection in exchange for trade and technology sharing. The Council was in trouble by the 3rd year. 12 more species had come to Earth to talk about defense agreements. Some people were openly questioning the Council's power. The old way of going to new worlds and demanding submission was falling apart. 10 years ago, species would have given up without question. Now they are asking, why should we? The people didn't. The Council didn't have a good answer. The Council held an emergency restructuring meeting in year 5. They could no longer ignore the issue. They had to change with the galaxy. New treaties were written that cut the amount of resources needed from 60% to 20%. It was no longer required to join the military. Observation posts were taken down from member worlds. The Council changed its name from a governing body to something more like a mutual defense alliance. It wasn't perfect, and a lot of species thought it didn't go far enough. But it was a step forward. And it all started because one kind of animal said no. Captain Jack Miller was still patrolling the solar system of Earth on the Titan. He was now 52 years old, and his hair was grayer and there were new lines around his eyes. His crew had changed a little over the years, with some members leaving and new ones joining. But the goal was still the same: to protect Earth and show that people would never give in to anyone. Miller would sometimes stand on the bridge and look at the stars during quiet shifts. He thought about how close they had come to giving up and how many people on Earth had told them to just accept the Council's terms. He thought about the 30 years of work and money spent making 12 huge warships for a threat that might never have happened. But it had happened. And people were ready. Lieutenant Torres, his second in command, came up to him with a report for the day. "Captain, we have another request for communication. This time it's from a group of people known as the Draxians. They want to talk about how to protect each other." Miller smiled a little. "Set up a meeting. Let's hear what they have to say." Miller turned back to the view screen as Torres walked away. Earth hung in the distance, blue, pretty, and free. 12 Titan-class warships stood around it, dark, strong, and ready. The galaxy had expected talks and for humans to accept their place in the established order. They had learned a lesson instead. People would want peace, work for peace, and hope for peace. But they would never ever forget to get ready for war. It was a way of thinking that came from 10,000 years of fighting and got better through many battles. Now it is projected into the stars. The Titan's engines made a low humming sound as it patrolled the area forever. Other species were out there watching and wondering. Some were scared. Some with respect. Some people hoped that the galaxy might be different now, just maybe. Captain Jack Miller and his crew of 2,000 people were on board the Titan, ready to make sure it would be.